Awesome. So thanks very much. And this is our second Community Connections event. Hopefully we find that we're able to have a really good conversation today. The focus today is on data storytelling, and we're going to break this conversation up into 4 parts. By all means, sing out, drop a question in the chat, and let's hope that it's a very interactive conversation with us today. So I've asked Lisa to join and to give us an introduction firstly around the work that Lighthouse does, but also talking about the kinds of data storytelling you did, Lisa, with the Lighthouse, and in the early days as you were getting the work off the ground, and how you told those stories and that benefit, I suppose, in terms of the data for your stories. So I might just hand over to you now to give an introduction, and as we go through, I'll ask a couple of questions. We've got probably 15 minutes with Lisa, so as I said, please do sing out if you have any questions as we go through. All right, so Lisa.
Thanks, Christy. So our data journey's been going since really 2011, 2012, the Lighthouse project in Greater Shepparton region in Northern Victoria, when we started to look for the first time at data in our community around young people and children. And I think it's fair to say we were all really shocked because we hadn't done that deep dive in our community before. People knew their own little bit, but no one knew the whole lot of it. It was sobering then, and it stays sobering. So our data stays poor, and you know, we have glimmers of hope, but lots of work to do. So I don't know if you ever become an expert in this space or an expert around. I think the more you know in some ways, the less you know, and bringing almost a humility and vulnerability to this work is essential. So we did a State about Greater Shepparton Children report in about 2013, I think it was, and that, you know, captured and started to share that data. And then that's when I learned that the extent that people are not so keen on data being shared, and the extent that they really like to sit on the data. And I think that comes from a whole host of reasons around common practice, around sort of coalescing around data, experts coalescing around data in their own field, and around, I think, shame. So I think shame is often at the heart of why people quietly or, you know, sometimes subtly or sometimes not so subtly hold and shy away from sharing data. Anyway, so that was a learning. That was probably our first learning. We decided that if we were going to tackle this thing, we really had to dive into using and sharing data in a big way. And we stumbled across Seer in their infancy as they were emerging out of as a startup in Sydney. And we funded through Perpetual helping to establish the early platform. And so we soon got heavily into data, and it's the best thing we ever did in our community, because I think it's enabled us to have some pretty awkward, pretty real conversations that had to happen. And it enabled, when we were setting up, we are a collective impact site. We have 40 or 50 people on our leadership tables, and they come from all walks of life. And I think that has been a great strength of our leadership tables, so that as much as we may have social workers and teachers and early years experts, we also have engineers and builders and I'm trying to think of the most random people we have on there, but from literally all walks of life in our community. And I think what that's done is it's done away with the notion that only a few people are responsible for the solutions, and it's opened up that our whole community is responsible for the solution. And so the data has enabled us to do that. So we created with Seer fairly detailed, though significant data packs for each of those tables. We started with 4 tables and we've condensed them over time to 2. We have an early years and primary table and a secondary and transition to work table. We're a conception to career place-based site. And those packs were they sat on everyone's desks. They become very sort of worn with use, and they were the first time most of those people on the table had seen that data, had that easy, ready access to that data, and were able to interrogate it. And that was everything that related to children in our community as far as we could find of publicly available data sets. You name it, we put it all together in one pack that related to that age grouping. And then we interrogated that and asked people what they saw, how they felt about it, how they, what response that elicited in them. And I guess that was our first discussions. And from there, we were able to drill down into things we thought were of most concern, that were most prescient or needed tackling, and to start our long and drama-filled journey. So, we use data we use those big overarching data sets as calls to action around things like AEDC figures, around particular issues. Teen pregnancy is one at the moment that one of the tables is unpacking. So we take the data and we use it to, we put other research and information around it. Seer developed a tool that we were able to compare our community and other communities and their likeness. And I think that's been useful in a lot of other communities as well now, but we're able to look at all the characteristics of our community and how they compare to the characteristics of other communities, and then how we were faring relative to them. And that gave us new insights, because how bad is this? Is this just a Shep problem, or is this a problem elsewhere and our other towns like us? And then we look at often other towns not like us, because that's interesting as well. And then we use local insights and local data to, further inform and look at that data. And then we use a process which we call 1,000 Conversations, which we started, I think, in 2013-14, continued in 2018-19, where we interrogate, we ask 1,000 people in our community how things are working and not working for children. And that provides us with that sort of deep local insight. And then with the expertise on the tables and other expertise in our community, we deep dive around it all and come up with what we think are the best decisions, the things most likely to lead to change. We call things out, we challenge things. When ministers come to town, we use the data. When we want to shake up areas or pockets of concern, we use the data. And when we want to shift power, we use the data. So it's become an invaluable, it creates a more democratic environment to do our work. It's not about those who have the secret business and those that don't. We all have it, and everyone has a view and can share that view. And I think it provides us with a platform for action. Is that all right?
Interesting. Please, anyone interrupt if you have a question, by all means. So Lisa, I was really interesting because, it's been an honour to work with you in the Shepparton community for a long time, and I know you talked about the drama, and I think it's that work that is needed, so needed through the work that collective impact initiatives do across the country, and in looking for the systemic change. But it is such a gradual work in progress always, and I know that we have so many of our colleagues on the line here from Logan together, and also Hands Up Mally and others. So are there any, how you've talked about data setting context, having better conversations, are there any examples of any, I guess you could say, small wins where the data has helped you shift something that you and the community felt was really important, but you weren't being heard before then?
I think there's some big wins, although they remain to be seen if they're big wins, but there's potential big wins in that I do feel that us owning, sharing, and coalescing around the data led to a massive investment in education, or certainly attribution is always difficult, but certainly played a key role, I think, in the decision to create an education plan from early years right through schooling in Shepparton. And we're midway through that. We're in the midst of, and you possibly have seen it in the news, we're in the midst of a major overhaul of education in Shepparton that's resulting in 4 senior secondary schools being brought together into one. It's a $120 million investment just in that part alone. I know that us having the confidence to discuss things in that space and inviting other members of the community into that space to discuss the issues and the data has contributed to that investment. The investment remains, at the moment, we're midway through a very controversial and challenging process, but I don't think that journey, to be honest, would have started unless we had the confidence to be up and about our educational outcomes and the confidence to talk about them with the keepers of the information and the knowledge and the power in that space, the Department of Education.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I remember as well, this is going back a little while, but when you had that question asking for some analysis to be done around the ADC indicators and NAPLAN results, and what was the impact of ADC indicators across those NAPLAN results. And we did that, Adam, not we, did that piece of work to help illuminate what I thought was really fascinating. I think it also too inputted to your conversations in that at that time, which was, and this is probably not a surprise to all of us, but anyway, the key highlight from that piece of analysis was the domain of emotional impacts on the ADC had the most sustaining impact on NAPLAN results. Now we understand right through to year 9. So we understand that NAPLAN is only one, measurement, and there's a lot of controversy around that. But that interesting piece of insight gave you, I think, and the team some confidence around then how we're supporting families, particularly in the early years, on that work.
And our work, our primary focus on connection is still really wrapped around that piece of data, that understanding that connection, very early attachment within your family and beyond is the foundation of our work. And so we continue to use that lens every single day. The data is not just something that we do once a year or something. I imagine it's the case for everyone. It's become the norm, but it's certainly when we started, this was sort of innovative, and we use data every day in every way, our own data internally as well, looking at our programs and their outcomes and the measurement we put in place, start to finish around those things, combined with the national data sets, combined with our locally available data sets, and increasingly we're getting access to data. It's been slow burn, but increasingly we're getting access to data that's locally available, sort of closed data sets that we're able to interrogate. We haven't been successful in getting many on the platform, but people are providing us with all sorts of data to use to inform our decision making.
Yeah, that's awesome. We just have to suck it up and put it in.
I know. Yeah.
That's great, Lisa. Does anyone have any thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
Or if Sarah Payne, who's from our site, knows at least as much about it as I do.
Awesome. So thank you, Lisa. I'm great setting of the scene around storytelling. Jen is Jen Riley, who I'm sure you all know, who's been working in collective impact and data for, Jen, I don't know, you probably have to tell me the exact number, for as long as you can remember and everyone here can remember. And so I wanted to ask Jen to talk a little bit about then that storytelling in a community not far from Lighthouse and Shepparton in Maryborough and Go Goldfields. So hopefully the share screen is activated for you, Jen, if you would like to share any of those dashboards, and over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sharing my my screen. Everyone see that? The Go Goldfield screen?
Yes.
Right. So I've worked on and off with Goldfields probably for about 6 or 7 years with Sharon Fraser, which many of you probably know. And yeah, we did sort of some theories of change with them, and they went off and did their thing. And they are place-based. They've got 4 priority working groups: children and family, youth, eco participation, and family safety. So quite a large remit. They're sort of about 2.5, 3 hours out of Melbourne, sort of up northwest. And they've got a really great structure, governance structure there. So they've sort of got the backbone. They've got something called the collaborative table, which is sort of built on that, 5, 5, 5, and 5. Remember that model? 5 NGO, 5 government, 5 business, 5 community. Like, they really try to implement a lot of that sort of best practice and collective impact. And you can see they're sort of connected in with Best Start and Child Aware and other sorts of groups as well. So they were very good at connecting in back to those areas. They have a theory of change, which I'm not going to go into the detail on. But our role was to help them, basically help them to visualize their theory of change into dashboards. So I'll show you, this is on their website. If you go to gogoldfields.org or .com, you'll see all these dashboards on their website, because they were really keen to give data back to community. And what we found, was a gap in data, and we deliberately put these gaps in their dashboards to sort of really draw, action to that. Can you see them? I've got 2 screens up, so can you see the dashboard now?
Yep, can see it. Thank you.
So what we were trying to do here was sort of look at the short-term indicators of sort of feeling safe at home and first-time parents group attendance and service referrals, to mid-term indicators, sort of going with that theory of change. Well, if you improve the positive family environment, if you get them into kindergarten, if you get the parents connected, you'll reduce stress, improve literacy, reduce developmental vulnerability. So we built these using Power BI, and what was awesome was that we were able to connect back to Seer. So I'll share with you the process, because I think the process is really interesting. I'll just show you the pretty pictures, and there's some interactivity of, people can select on, little bits and pieces. But I mean, in an ideal world, data is quick moving on dashboards. And really the one that I really loved, I'll just show you some of these, was the echo participation, because this data was real time last year and is up until November. Look what happened last year. What happened? What happened last year in March and April, everyone?
Yeah. Dare we try to remember? Yes.
And especially in Victoria, like, you can see this perfect view, and this was the number of local jobs available that they were sitting down and counting in the local, newspapers and job boards. So how interesting was that for them to see that real-time data? What we wanted to do was connect that back to people seeking employment, draw a real interesting line between, there's this many jobs and this many people seeking employment. So we were being a bit strategic with how we were presenting the data and drawing those things together. And perhaps we could do it better again, but you can see the gaps in data here. We certainly had a lot more long-term population level stuff connected back to Seer, but the local shorter term stuff, definitely, what they wanted versus what they had, really challenging. But certainly got quite a bit of data on youth and family safety. So it was massive. This was 36 indicators across 4 dashboards. So it was a really, really big undertaking to set this all up, and still, we had these gaps. So going back to this screen. So I'll quickly take you through the process, because I think what sits behind this work is what's important. And I think the first thing was really that theory of change and population level outcomes, and what were their North Stars, what was important to them, and really working with the working groups, connecting back to best practice indicators and frameworks so that we had these national data sets to connect to, linking it back to outcomes. And then, but then we had to triangulate it with what was available as well. And even though we have these gaps, we had to see what was already there and what could be shared. So there was this huge sort of iteration of we'd like this data set, doesn't exist. What about this data set? Okay, let's change it up. And then there was the automating part. So we automated data sets from Seer. And so we worked with the team to create an API to refresh, which is the holy grail, right, of all our work, is that we automate data collection and reporting so that we can actually spend our time on insights, as we all know, and strategy and the so what, now what conversation, and just really get this humming along. So that was really great that we were able to do that. But then the gaps, and this is where we got into bespoke survey and data collection locally. So we put in a bunch of sort of surveys and then forms, like for instance, a simple form for staff to input the number of job adverts for the month that were connected to spreadsheets. So you could see that that data was flowing through. Somebody had to go in and update that once a week or whatever. And then the last point, so after going through, automate what you can, collect what's missing, and then it was the visualization piece, and they had a sort of big launch on that back in March last year. So there was the data party. You can see myself there and Adam. We all got to wear funny glasses. Adam somehow got out of that. But anyway, what was fun is they got all of the people together, including a local mum and her daughter. I think this was the local head of council, and a real mixture of people from the health, So there was a real, mixture of people that turned up to the data party, as we called it, when we were trying to sort of work out which data have we got, what would community like. But I think what sat behind building this infrastructure was really being able to sit with community. We had to put somebody in community for 3 months, dedicated. She went up there, one of our consultants, to painstakingly go through all of those 36 indicators to work out who was connecting data, where was it, how could we integrate it with day-to-day practice, sitting with the family violence worker and saying, okay, so you report this to the Department of Government, could you just send an email to us as well? It was this process of getting to know community, and you guys are all connected to your local communities and know who those people are. So probably would have been a bit of an easier process. I think Georgia spent the first month just having coffee, so getting to meet everyone. But we built this sort of system where it was like, there is no one magical source. It had to be, connecting with our partners at Seer, having data champions within the community, building local capacity, and then sort of, there was some manual data entry, and then there was some automation, and then, it flowed through our system, which was sort of Power BI, SharePoint system, into the dashboards. But yeah, so there's probably so much more I could talk about, but I just wanted to give you, a little bit of a flavour of what it took to actually get that data and dashboards up. Yes.
Thanks, Jen. Such an awesome project, and they look so beautiful as well. I'm curious, how has the community engaged with those data stories on the dashboard? Do you have any?
There's always the challenges of consultancy, isn't it? That you sort of set stuff up and you see things put in, and then then you sort of hand it over. And I think the other big shift that happened was that Sharon Fraser sort of left, and then of course there was another change of management. So I don't know. I mean, we've been saying actually we need to check in with them and see how it's going, because I think it is. It's the so what now what. What does this all mean? We've done this work. I think it certainly did help them focus on a number of things. And we certainly had that experience with another community. We worked with a community up in Loddon, which is in Western Victoria as well, where again, showing them data actually got them to go, we're spending all our time on maternal child health nurse visits, but actually the emotional behavioral issues are the problems. And they could see that on a dashboard, and then they change their strategy. So that was probably one of my most exciting sort of, well, it changed practice and behavior examples. And that there are examples of that. But yeah, Goldfields, it takes momentum, and you guys know this in community. It's the energy to get these things up, and then you've got to pass the baton, and then somebody else has got to have a load of energy to drive it forward and keep it live and keep it real with amongst the noise that's going on and crisis that's going on in community as well.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Before I move, does anyone have any questions for Jen? Good to see you, Kate. Welcome. Nice to see you. Hello to Katrina as well, who recently joined, and Lisa.
I'd just like to make a comment. When we wanted to survey our community about the impact of COVID towards the end of last year to inform our recovery planning, we found that if we put up on Facebook a data champion every couple of days from different parts of the community, we suddenly got a spike in surveys being completed. So it's kind of a bit of learning that we're going to take forward into our work.
Yeah, interesting. Having a data champion certainly helps with encouraging people to contribute, whether, as you're saying, Fiona, whether you're talking about answering survey or contributing data itself. And I know that particularly through COVID as well, Jane's told me that the Homelessness and Housing Collaboration and Coalition in and around Mildura has been sharing data, albeit on Excel spreadsheets, to Hands Up Mallee to try to address that issue, which is terrific, and does take that data champion. I wanted to now switch into some storytelling we've been working with a number of our users on, which is how do you tell a story that's topical in the moment and encourage people to contribute not only their thoughts, ideas, strategy as a partner, but also their data. And we've been doing quite a bit with the Byron Shire. I hope you can see that. This is for everyone who's in Seer, you know that we have this thing we're really excited about, which is called our data storytelling dashboard. We've been working with the Northern Rivers Community Foundation really for the last couple of years, and with the coalition of partners up there in and around the Community Foundation, including Byron Shire Council. And Byron Shire Council is working in a collaboration of service providers and not-for-profits and the Community Foundation on the issue of housing and homelessness. And as we can all imagine, through particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, even longer, Airbnb and private letting has really meant in places like the Northern Rivers that people and housing has become very unaffordable. And so recently, Byron Shire Council, just a couple of days ago, came to us and said, we really need to understand what all the public data is around this issue of housing and homelessness. We have a meeting with our Homelessness and Housing Coalition next week. And so we've created a storytelling dashboard for that meeting, which means we were able to quickly identify the public data sets that relate to this issue in this story, and then in addition to that, be able to highlight what the key issue is. And just yesterday, the ABC reported on Byron being second to Sydney in terms of homelessness in that community. In fact, it's impacting women the most. So what we've done here and what you can see is a quick and easy story. We call it the storytelling dashboard. It's a new view on the suitcase where you can bring in your stories, videos, including this particular one that will help inform the Housing and Homelessness Coalition next week that Byron Shire Council has convened and has been working with for some time. But here's the local story, the ABC story, some local voices. In addition to that, a number of insights that give the coalition the understanding of what's publicly available in all of those open data sets. So we just quickly built this, and then what the team can do is then share this publicly with the coalition. And so it's our contribution to the ability to tell stories quickly, but also understand what is publicly available. So out of this conversation that they'll have next week, because they'll have so many of their partners at the table, they'll identify, for example, the public data sources are actually not going to help as much as they would like on this particular issue. Unfortunately, we're drawing from ABS and census data, which is not as timely as what we would like. And there's probably a lot of data that they're going to ask partners to contribute as a result. Through this work, then they'll understand, what indicators they might want to contribute to, what data sets they can all share. And then through the templates that we've set up, and some of you on the call have been using the Byo Data Templates, which we're calling them, so that you can that your partners can contribute data into a single collection and then enrich that with that community level data that Jen spoke to. What we're really excited about is then, you can quickly tell a story, can identify the gaps, we can help you bring it in. But then, as Jen talked to, we can then connect that with your Power BIs if you want to tell those more sophisticated stories, or if you have analysts that are working with it. Nevertheless, we're pretty happy to be able to quickly respond to these kinds of questions that are topical, that are in the moment, that are media driven, and that, for example, the community itself wants to understand what's going on. And so you can see, you can jump into what the data is actually saying. So any questions or comments on that one before I hand over to Adam and Tamsin? All right. So at this point, thank you. I'm going to hand to Adam to share your screen. And now we're going to talk a little bit about and how to use data science to impact or influence a policy conversation.
Yeah, cool. Hi, everybody. So can everybody see, you can all see the map that I've got up on the screen just here? Everyone's nodding, that's good. So I'm gonna want to hand to Tamsin, obviously, to talk about like the conditions on the ground in Logan and what the objectives and sort of priorities, if you like, of the Logan Together initiative is, and how they've used this work so far. And so what I'll do is try to keep my contribution to be very much just kind of like the details of this analysis, and let Tamsin talk to how it's being used and what are some of the insights from it that they've found to be useful. What you're looking at on the map right here, in terms of where we're looking, this is the Logan LGA. If I hover my mouse over that, you can see that boundary there is the Logan LGA. So that's just to the south of the Brisbane CBD, and just to the north of the Gold Coast area to the south down there. So what we've done with this analysis, firstly, is just to sort of define our analysis boundary, where we're looking on this map to do the analysis. And so that's the great big circle that you can see drawn on here. If I hover over that, just says analysis boundary. And the objective really of this analysis, and this map, is to present some work that we did to look at the balance of supply and demand for early education and care facilities throughout this region. So the layer on the map that you're looking at here, in terms of all these little colorful areas, each of those little areas is what we call an SA1, or we don't call them an SA1, the ABS calls them an SA1, statistical area level 1. It's kind of the smallest area that you can get really quite detailed census information for, and in particular, for each of those areas, we can get a good estimate for the number of children in the 3 to 4 year age range. So we can understand, if you like, how many children there are in the Logan LGA that would be seeking childcare services, and broadly speaking, where they're distributed throughout the region. And where you can see on the map here, the different colors sort of reflect the density per square kilometer of children in that location, where it's on this the sort of sliding color scale from a deep purple, which means not many children or children few and far between, right across to a deep red, which indicates there are a lot of children or children, densely packed into that region. So lots of children in that location. So you can see that there's a corridor, if you like, through the Logan LGA, through the northeastern corner of Logan LGA, which has some higher population areas. And in particular, if we zoom right in on, what have we got here? It's kind of hard to see, maybe behind Slacks Creek or to the northeast of Slacks Creek. There's a hotspot of children just a little bit south here in the sort of Marsden area. There are a lot of children as well. And that really sets a baseline for where the need is for early education and care in this region. Our analysis then draws on another data set which is publicly available. I'm just going to move some controls out of the way so I've got access to those controls. In the bottom right, I can open up and drop onto this map the providers. So these providers, each one of these little tiles on this map now is representative of an early education and care facility. I'm often found to be like, shortening that to a childcare or a preschool or something of that nature, but you'll have your own sort of probably shorthand for it. And they're all of a different kind, I suppose. They're all of a different size. So just dropping on the tile onto the map doesn't give you an indication really of what the capacity is for that provider or the quality of that provider. But we do have that information as well. And all that information is coming from a public register published by the Australian Early Education and Care Quality Authority, also known as ASEQA. So if you check out the ASEQA website, you can get access to that register as well. They'll let you know some of the details that you can see that we've got on this little pop-up that we're displaying here for this particular center, which is the Kids Corner Early Learning Waterford. They've got an approved places of 59, so they can accommodate 59 children at that provider. Their overall quality rating is meeting the national quality standards. And well, you can see where they're located there on the map. So the idea would be with this model that what we want to do is work out, by and large, under a set of assumptions about how families are going to seek childcare for their children, how many children are going to be trying to go to each of those providers. And on that basis, how many children might be missing out, might be having to travel a long way to get to the provider of their choice, or might be forced to attend a provider that's poor quality or not top quality. So basically, we trained a machine learning model to do that. It finds like a minimum energy solution, if you like, to the problem of allocating children in each of those areas, the proportion of children in each area, to a provider that makes most sense based on those three objectives of distance, quality, and capacity. And when you do that, we can get an idea of where most of the children in each location are attending, and I'll drop that layer onto the map now too. So I zoom in now and I can see where the children in each of those locations are going, or the majority of them anyway, are going to which provider on the map. And you can see now, like kind of the point of drawing a larger boundary around the Logan LGA for the purpose of this analysis is because you want to make sure that if there are edge effects occurring near the boundary of the Logan LGA, where there might be some children on one side of the boundary and providers on the other, that your attention is broad enough so that you can capture those edge effects nicely. I'm hoping that my computer is actually going to continue to respond to me here. It seems to be
the blue circle.
That's right. I've got the Windows equivalent of the spinning wheel of death.
So it might be trying to tell you something. So maybe what we could do is pause, since you're not getting much from your computer, and just ask Tamsin if you could share with us how you've been using that model to tell that story to policymakers and what you're hearing.
Sure. So sorry, I just had to change location because we've got someone doing a mowing outside the window and a ride-on mower. So just started up. So hopefully you can hear me and I'm in an okay spot. I did actually lose connection for a minute, so I missed the last bit of what Adam was saying. But if I've got it correctly, you want me to share a little bit about how we're using that.
Yeah, as a tool for telling a story, exactly.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So thanks for that intro, Adam. That was really helpful. So I guess what we're using it for on a number of different ways, but the main one, I had a chat to Belle, who's our kindy program manager, and the main way that she's been using it so far, which has been really helpful, is having that data has allowed her to, I guess, start updating the picture of what the landscape is like with the service providers and with others who are here in Logan. So historically, for example, in Logan, we did have an issue with quality, but the picture has shifted somewhat. The data shows that the picture has shifted somewhat. So there is some pockets where that's an issue, but typically now there's quite a lot of providers who are meeting quality standards. That's not necessarily the belief around in conversation around the place, because that has been a shift, and now we've got data to show that. So that's really helpful in making sure that what we and others are doing are addressing the current needs and the actual landscape of the way things are now, not maybe how things were when we all started working in the space. So Belle has been using that in various forums to update the sector and other players on, this is what we're finding now, this is where there's different issues in different pockets, and this is the overall picture. And she said that that's been really helpful in doing that. We're also sharing that information with our different tables, so our action group and our leadership table and the board. So they also then have that data, and then they can share that same information in their work and in their conversations, and use that if they're at the action group, where they're actually working at the project level, can use that in their planning as well. Matthew will take that more into higher level policy conversation. So Matthew's our director of the backbone team, as might be the case for some of the leadership table members or board members, depending what their space is. But it probably gives, I guess what it does is gives concrete evidence to support what we already felt was going on as well. So there's a sense of validating, I guess, our approach in some ways, and also updating our perception about what's happening in others.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Any comments or thoughts on that? I mean, as you know, as you can see, it's a pretty sophisticated model. It takes a long time to, doesn't it?
Could I maybe share one thing about, actually, in addition to that? So we found that it is a really sophisticated model, and it's really helpful, and the work that Adam did in explaining to me and Belle and others how it all fits together was really important. I then made it into an even simpler one-pager that basically drew parts of your report, Adam, and left other parts out that probably were more for the detail. But I think, yeah, that telling the story of the data for me was quite easy based on what you'd provided, to write something in very plain English language that we can then easily share. So I think even though the model looks complex at first glance, it doesn't take people long to get their head around it when you just explain the key elements, and also there's the interactive tool that people can play with, and also we just grabbed screenshots of different bits with different layers added, and then would explain what that's showing, and then the overall picture when you put those all together. So I think the initial complexity isn't as daunting as it might seem, but there's a lot of value, I think, in having that complexity there.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Apologies, everybody. I didn't get to actually show you the result. I can now, but you know, I might have gone way over time anyway. What the actual results look like in terms of, you know, the hotspots of need, but those are the other layers. So essentially, it'll show you, hey, there's a hotspot of need here, a hotspot of need here, and that can be of different kinds. It might be traveling too far, poor quality, not enough capacity. Yeah, so yeah.
Great.
Thanks, Tamsin.
No worries. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So just in the last couple of minutes, we have a number of team members from different place-based initiatives and leaders. Did you want to talk about any of your own experiences using data to tell stories at all? I mean, we've heard today from Lisa in the early days of the Lighthouse and how data was helping to have better conversations, have more powerful conversations as well, and led to some funding, some major funding really, to as well as it helped contribute as a tool to that, Lisa. And then we heard from Jen around then how do you pull all of that data together that matter particularly for the community, and how do you celebrate the story and how do you tell the story, as well as, and what does that mean moving forward in terms of local data and what's needed to then own that as an asset and continue to contribute. And then I've just dropped into the chat the public link of the Byron storytelling dashboard, which is, as I mentioned, we hope a helpful tool for people who want to tell faster stories, whether it's using open data or the data that you have that's privately available in your own platform in Seer, or that data has been shared with you. And I think increasingly we're going to see that. One very large piece of work that we're working on right now is community hubs, and many of you might work with the community hubs around Australia. I'm sure you do. I know that the Shepparton community does, and I know that there are 3 or 4 in Logan as well. And these are, they're working with us, bringing in all of their attendance data. And that attendance data is then available to every one of those hub leaders, but then they have coordinators, and then they have a central team. And so that's a very comprehensive data component. And then they share that out to all their school principals and their stakeholders in and around the work that they do in context, to then sort of give an update and a data story update through that storytelling dashboard, which is we're really excited about, because it's private data, it's open data, it's stories, it's video, it's content to help engage local people and principals in their work. And then we, of course, heard great story, what data can do when you have a more complex question, and we're really excited about that work. Where it's Open Data Week, celebrating Open Data Week this week all over the world. And we're really proud that you can create really sophisticated models to help the team at Logan work with open data. This is publicly available data to give you more power in this work that you do. And we believe that you can ask a complex question of public data, and we should advocate for more open data. But then when we can't get it, we should share it. So that's a summary, and love to hand over any questions or comments. And I'm conscious that we've done a bit of talking.
I just think you made a good point there, Christy, about the complex questions of public data. I think we've almost got a bit, ho-hum, only got public data, or can only use public data. There's so many ways to unpack it and to look for sort of correlations, or look for new learnings, or look for new insights, comparing it to other localities, like and communities, and communities less like, seeing what their investments are, and then seeing how their outcomes compare. I just feel like it's endless, really, the way you can unpack just the publicly available. And I do still feel like we're only scratching the surface, and it's only limited by our imagination. I feel like every time I participate in something like this, I feel excited to think about, what we haven't thought of yet. Just tragic, really. So yeah, I completely agree that we're just still grappling with what's possible just for from the sets that we have.
Yeah, great. I'll answer your question in a moment, Fiona. Thank you for that around how do we get data from hospitals? It's a good question. But first, before I do, to the point of public data, I mean, really all the models that Adam's building and those complex data sets. So you spoke to the similar communities model that is now a data set in Seer that everyone can use, that came from your complex question, Lisa, which is, what other communities are like ours? And then, as you know, you can go into Seer and you can build an understanding of what other communities are most like yours, even down to an SA2 level. And for all of us who know, that's almost about the size of a suburb. So that's really cool. And then the supply and demand model, we've got the wealth transfer estimate and the giving index. If you haven't seen it, jump into Seer. The giving index will tell you the scale and likelihood of people to volunteer and give donations in your community, kind of a scale of social capital. And when you attach that to the wealth transfer, you can see the capacity of giving. And that complex question came from the community in Wangaratta, just down the road. I love that community. So great. And then, and you know, and then the population model, which hopefully you've seen made available just yesterday or the day before and that's all based on public data. Do you want to talk to that one a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so yeah, to your point, Lisa, you know, there's like heaps in public data sets, lots of interesting analyses you can do looking for correlations, looking for patterns. One of the ideas that we had, you know, is we wrote a little bit of a blog. So on our website, you can go and have a look at, you know, all the, satisfy yourself with a whole bunch of detail, you know, with the machine learning and data science aspects. But very simply, we thought, you know, we've got historic census data and, you know, there's a new census just around the corner. You know, can we build a machine learning model that's going to predict distribution over age and sex by suburb, more or less, you know, all around Australia right now? You know, and you know, that would be a model that we could replicate, you know, year after year, make a guess about the next census and the census after that, the census after that, get a view as to how population is likely to evolve over a, you know, 5 to 10 year period, which is super helpful for lots of efforts in planning and decision making. How many kids are we going to have to accommodate in our childcare centres in 5 years' time? How many elderly people are we going to need to make sure we've got space to accommodate in, you know, high care facilities or whatever that might be. So yeah, that was a really cool exercise. Go and check it out. Let us know if you have questions.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Hey, Fiona, it would be great if you could talk a little bit about the animation with a forecast of 900 babies. What a great idea.
Well, we did a draft one and using Go Animate software because it was cheap.
Yeah.
And we took it to the LGBTQI group of youth and asked them just to have a look at it for us, because I reckon they would be our most serious critics. And they told us it was total crap in their words. And then they suggested to us that some approaches that we could use with that, and it turned our thinking on our head, and so we built something else using the Go Animate software, and it worked really well. But we felt we needed to, because the data was so dismal, we thought we needed to couch it in the terms of, well, we accept our community as it is now, but it's just the future we want to accept for our next lot of children. So we basically said, this is what the future is going to be like if the stats don't change. And it became a very powerful story. And it was a very easy way for people to internalize those patterns and them thinking, no, I don't want that for my children.
Really interesting. Thank you so much. And I love the idea of animations, and I think we've worked with lots of, look, I think that the key thing as well, community wants to tell the story and the way they want to tell it. And so sometimes it's not just through, obviously it's through lots of different ways, including visuals and graphs and story, not always a chart and tables, clearly, or maps.
And really important to test it with some community before you scale it out.
Absolutely. Hey Lisa, thank you for your question, which is, do data learning models, machine learning models, show different outcomes to, I think you mean machine learning models, data learning? Yeah. Oh, thank you, sorry, I saw that. To government forecasts, which are top-down models, or ID.com forecasting, which is bottom-up forecasts built with local communities. Is there something to learn from the machine learning approach?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Lisa. I suppose probably to begin with, I'd just let you know we haven't done a great deal of effort. I haven't put in a great deal of effort yet to compare our predictions with other predictions that are out there by ID or other government sources, such as they are. From what I understand, most of the government sources like the ABS and what have you will make predictions about, which I usually say are top-down forecasts for the whole country or for a whole state or territory. Very rarely will a government source go to a local level. You know, in that regard, our approach, I guess, would be different. Well, I shouldn't say it's necessarily that I know exactly how it's different, but if it is a top-down approach, then ours is very much bottom-up and data-driven, and it's at a local level. So that would be like, I guess, how it's a little bit different to the way the government might approach that kind of work. And compared with Forecast ID, again, I'm not intimately familiar with exactly their approaches to demographic modeling. But you know, traditional methods that are in use and are sort of promulgated in the literature involve, as we sort of set out a little bit in the blog, you know, empirical models based on you know, estimates of birth, death, migration, and aging, basically. So once you have your picture set for what those forces are going to do to your population over a period of time, you put that through a very simple sort of calculation, if you like, and out comes the result. I say simple calculation, the calculation's simple, but arguing and debating what those different forces are going to look like and whether, you know, young people are going to continue to be attracted to this area, or if our aging population is going to stay in place or move to the suburb next over, or whatever. You know, those are things that the consulting effort behind a forecast ID, you know, estimate, you know, might get right, but in any event is going to be based on a whole bunch of opinions and those estimates. Our approach, as a bottom-up approach and a data-driven approach, is essentially to say, you know, let's hypothesize that how a population is likely to evolve is encoded, if you like, in how it has evolved over the last couple of censuses, and the shape or distribution, if you like, over age and sex over those last two censuses. And we're going to train our machine in a kind of a black box way, but it is somewhat interrogable. We can, you know, dive deep to understand exactly why it is it's giving some of these predictions, you know, and then use that model to make predictions about everywhere, all across Australia, all at once. You know, which is much more of a cost-effective approach, essentially, to demographic modeling. You know, than going in and, you know, place by place coming up with those individual estimates. So it's like we've got one methodology, we apply it everywhere, and yeah, that would be like a slightly different approach that we would take. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam.
I could talk for days about that, so I'm just getting kicked to stop talking.
Okay, so Lisa's saying, okay, so similar methodology as a traditional forecast, thank you. We've added things like new sewer connections, etc., to keep the change as current as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I guess probably the distinction I would draw is our methodology doesn't rely on direct estimates of birth, death, migration, and aging. Our machine learning model essentially learns to base its predictions on things that you'd probably recognize that were of that sort, but we don't teach the machine, you know, directly about those things. It sort of learns for itself. And, you know, where there are actions, I guess, part of the machine learning philosophy or approach to demographic modeling, I guess, involves an assumption that, you know, it's going to continue to evolve. This population is going to continue to evolve, as populations generally do, in response to the actions and decisions that people by and large tend to take. So where there are actions taken by local governments, for example, to install new sewer lines, provide new transport capacity, new housing, those are a set of decisions, I guess, that we'd be relying on being consistent with decisions that had been made by and large in response to those kind of demographic factors over time as well. And so those would sort of naturally, I guess, to the extent that they are, unless there's been like a totally radical change in the way we approach, planning and decision making about, housing and what have you, you'd expect for those kinds of forces to evolve and play out in the same way. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer.
Thank you, Adam. Hey, it's 5 minutes, almost 5 minutes past 2. So I would like to thank you all for joining. Fiona, the answer to your question on hospital data is that we have to generally have data sharing agreements in place if it's that kind of data. What's publicly available is hospital admissions and other such things I'm sure you're familiar with through the Social Health Atlas, which is in Seer. But we do have in New South Wales anyway, New South Wales Health contributing into Seer for the place-based data sharing work that's happening in Burke. But those data sharing agreements have to be set up in place, unfortunately, unless it's publicly available. On the other hand, we can, it depends on, sometimes, for example, in New South Wales, we have the Regional and Rural Remote Medical Services, Regional and Remote Medical Services, RAMS, who contribute data and then can then make that available to the place-based initiatives through an agreement. So I hope that helps answer the question. Thank you very much, everybody, for a great session. Appreciate all your time. Sounds like we probably might need to do a machine learning model one at some time. Anyway, that's great. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.